There's four major pieces of your home insurance that is not listed on your policy today. Unless you've asked for it or your agent has specifically told you that you need to cover these additional pieces, let's dive in and go over what are those four things that you could be missing that could cost you thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have the right claim. The first piece is flood. Flood is not a part of an insurance policy. It's not your homeowner's policy. It's an additional add-on to a policy. Now, if you're purchasing a home and they say you need flood insurance, you don't really have a choice. In order for you to get a loan to purchase the home, you have to have flood insurance in order to move forward. I've seen it sometimes where somehow people got loans and they processed and the flood insurance never went into place when you're in a flood zone. There are flood zones that you can look up yourself, but essentially if you don't have flood insurance and there is a flood, then you're not covered. What is considered a flood? A flood is water coming into the house. So if water comes up from the ground level, that's considered flood. Your house is designed to block the water, even though our houses don't do a great job because we're technically in clay bowls and that's our type of dirt that we typically have. It's going to happen with a lot of homes, and that's one thing that you've got to be careful with because most insurance doesn't cover that. Now, how much is a flood policy? Usually it's about $1,000 or less per year. That's the last year, I think it was like $890 for the last 2023, and it's usually covering about $100,000 of your personal property, and I believe it's like $250,000 is the common for your personal liability of the home. In most cases, that's enough to at least get you by if that's something that you're looking for. The second coverage that's a major incident is earthquake. Most people don't realize that earthquake is not covered. It's one of those incidences, it's where it's area specific. So if you're in a state like Florida, you're gonna need it. If you're in a state like Michigan, odds are you probably don't need it. Yeah, we've had earthquakes, but a knocked over lawn chair is laughable versus your whole house going over. Now, there are states, in those major states, they sometimes start to put in those policies where they have earthquake built into them, but make sure that it's covered. If it's not listed in there, you may not have the right coverage to cover you if there is an earthquake. The unfortunate part is earthquake insurance is probably not as cheap as the flood insurance because it's almost predictable. The odds of an earthquake happening happen every so often, not exactly, but they can determine how much damage there is every 10 to 20 years, so that's easy to predict. Flood is based on your home rejecting the water, and in most cases we kind of know some houses will or won't, but at that level, where's the water coming from? How often does it rise? We can tell some of that. Versus the earthquake, you can't really tell when those happen. For that reason, on top of the damage that comes with an earthquake, there's a lot more damage. If you've ever been through one, let us know in the comments below what kind of damage it left. There's a lot more. I would fair to say, yes, water ruins a lot, but the house ripping apart can cause a lot more damage. Not to make it funny, but it's a lot different, and that's why you're gonna see the cost of an earthquake be a lot more expensive. The third piece is jewelry and your other personal items. So yes, jewelry is part of a policy, but they're very limited. Most policies don't cover more than $1,500, sometimes $2,500 worth of jewelry. In a lot of cases, and actually almost all cases, they don't even cover over $1,000 per item. It's kind of gotten to $1,500 lately, so they've upped it because of like the cost and inflation and all that, but they haven't upped the limit. You may have, if it's a decent policy, a $2,500 coverage for your jewelry with a limit of $1,500 per item. If you have a lot of jewelry and someone breaks in and steals all of your jewelry or some occurrence happens, you may not have enough coverage, if at all, for those scenarios. That's why they have what's called a rider. It's essentially an add-on to your policy called jewelry and other valuables. I'll link a video that goes a little bit more in depth on the difference between these, but there's blanket coverage and then there's specific actual cash value coverage. So you can have things appraised versus just saying, I have a lot, right? There's different options and you have to weigh and choose what's the best for you. That's not just jewelry. The other items can be guns, can be personal paintings, they can have high value items. If you have coins or if you have watches, different things that have higher values, you're gonna need to add those higher value items on top of that. It helps to have an appraisal value so you know what it's worth, and a lot of, if not most companies will ask for an appraisal if you have a certain high value item. That leads me into the fourth one, which I think is probably one of the most common. I know we talked about flood, but we didn't talk about water backup. If a pipe burst in your home and the pipe went bad and it just went out and water came everywhere, that's typically covered under dwelling A. That's your main coverage for the house. But if you have water backup, that's a little bit different of a scenario. Imagine if you've ever seen the toilet bubble or you've ever flushed it and maybe you see the water sway. That means that there's something going on with the pipes. Either there's a leak or there's a small gap or something's happening. If that water got clogged and it came back out of the toilet, or the sink got clogged and it came back up, or if someone left the sink on, didn't realize it, and the water just flowed everywhere, the bathtub overflowed, all of that is water trying to evacuate the home. That's not the same as a pipe bursting. The pipe bursting is a covered peril, a coverage incident, and the water backing up is something that is the failure of an action. And the failure of that action is the water coming up. You need to have water backup coverage. Now, with most policies, we typically like to have at least $10,000 worth of water backup. A lot of cases, that's not enough, but the cost to the coverage has to play a factor. How much can you afford to how much do you really need? Most homes should have $25,000, if not $50,000 worth of water backup. I'll be honest with you, I personally think I carry $25,000 for water backup, which I probably should carry a little bit more, but the cost starts to creep up. That's where having the right agent makes a difference, because there's packages that these insurance companies offer. Now, the flood and the earthquake, those are always separate policies on their own. But these packages usually cover extra jewelry, water backup, additional replacement costs. So if the house is a total loss, you can get extra coverage for that. Sometimes vanishing deductibles, different things that don't necessarily cost you as much if you bundle them all together. Sometimes you can even put a golf cart on there. It's part of a package. So depending on the company that you go with, we got to determine, are you a fit for company A, B, C, or D, and what packages do they have for your pricing point? If you are looking for a new agent, or you're looking to shop with multiple companies and try to find out what those packages would be a good fit, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check those out. Feel free to fill out a quote and we'll check multiple companies. Now, keep in mind, the biggest thing with your house insurance is to understand what coverages you actually need. The things have changed so much, and the valuation of your home has changed so much. The replacement cost versus the value. If I sold the house tomorrow, it might only be worth $800,000, but they're only covering $500,000. Like, what's the deal with that? I'll link my Home Insurance 101 that will go into depth on all of those specific coverages. If you're just looking for more discounts and you think you got the right policy, but you want to try to save some more, I'll link my home insurance discounts right there. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.